I'd like to invite our guest of honor, Shri Piyush Srivastava, Senior Economic Advisor, Ministry of Civil Aviation, to address this august gathering. With over 30 years of experience across various ministries, Shri Srivastava is on the board of AI Class, and in his present posting in Ministry of Civil Aviation, Piyush looks after drones, cargo sector, aircraft manufacturing and MROs, and aircraft leasing and finance. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Shri Piyush Srivastava.
Thank you so much, Reshma ji. Gracing the dais today, Mr. Yashpal Sharma, Mr. Lakkaraju, Mr. Kapil Kaul, and of course, Mr. Sanjeev Edward. In the audience today, I can see my illustrious predecessor and senior in the service, Dr. Vandana Agarwal, and all the stalwarts of the air cargo industry, ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasure it is to be amongst this group of stalwarts today. These stalwarts have been instrumental in bringing out the civil aviation air cargo business out of the shadows of the passenger cargo. Perhaps that is an indication of, or rather the vindication of, the efforts of you, ladies and gentlemen, that the first event that the Honorable Minister for Civil Aviation, when he took charge and he's agreed to grace, was this one. Unfortunately, he could not make it today because of certain circumstances that overtook his schedule. But all of us have been in long enough in the public life. We all know how the time is at a premium in the public life, so he couldn't make it. I'm sure he would have loved to, and during the course of the day, I'm told by his office that he will definitely come over. Harping back to what Mr. Kaul was mentioning and my friend Mr. Yashpal was mentioning, the growth of the air cargo industry. When we look at the growth, the fact of the cargo sector being in the shadows of passenger sector is actually thrown to relief. Back in 2010 to 2013-14, the volume of air cargo transshipment was around 23.66 or maybe 24 lakh tons. Then it grew during this period at a rate of minus 0.99% CAGR. From 2014 to 2019, it really picked up. During this time, we saw the peak, as was very eloquently pointed out by Mr. Kaul in his presentation and was shown graphically also, that we managed to hit a peak. He said it in million tons. I will restrict myself to lakh tons. I am much comfortable that way. But anyway, the fact remains that we did hit 330 odd lakh tons. This represented a 5.66% growth. But all this time, the passenger traffic was growing at a faster clip than the air cargo. And during this time, in fact, at the end of this period, we were hit by a tragedy. The entire Indian economy and the world at large came to a grinding halt during the unfortunate event of COVID. That was the time when passenger traffic dipped to zero, but the cargo traffic did not. It still went along with a healthy clip, not very healthy, but not too bad either under the circumstances. When the entire cities were locked down, there was nothing except to rely on their own resources. They hit 24 lakh tons. Thanks to you guys, and I see again, I'll refer back to Dr. Agarwal and the Ministry of Civil Aviation at that time, but of course, whatever was achieved would not have been possible because you were the people who were doing the job on the ground, and you ensured that millions, if not crores of lives were saved by carrying PPE kits and vaccines and the like. Now, when this tragedy struck, that was actually in many ways a watershed moment for the cargo sector. That was the time when the people got used to carrying goods by air, and most of these habits, whether it is in the cargo sector or the passenger sector, tend to be inelastic. When they move to another sector, they get used to that comfort and then they don't go back. Hopefully that is the case, because I am saying this on behalf of the cap that I am wearing today in the civil aviation sector. So this is the way I would want it to remain, and it should continue to grow. During this time, of course, and the times after that also, the government of India has been trying to help the sector as far as possible. Mr. Yashpal Sharma was very kind in narrating those instances. Of course, I have to acknowledge that that was the time when the airports and the cargo terminals were kept open 24/7. And that was also the time when the Civil Aviation Ministry, in consultation with obviously the regulator, the DGCA, allowed the passenger to cargo conversion that was instrumental in raising the number of cargo freighters in the country from a meager 6 to 28 at that time. And then, of course, when the situation stabilized, the numbers fell back to 8, and now they have improved to 18 because the airlines and individual carriers are also acquiring aircraft, and we do expect that number to go up as we move along. During that time, the NSOP cargo was also restricted to 6 airports, which was in many ways a game changer because it opens up ways and avenues for future growth. Of course, there would be dissenting views on that, but somebody had to take the call, so that was a call that was taken. Thereafter, various other steps were taken. The airports and the cargo terminals were included in the harmonized list of infrastructure. Our own wing of cargo, the I-class, it simplified, it has now, in fact, last year, simplified the tariff structures at the AIA-operated non-AERA airports. More than 18 air cargo facilities of domestic and international airports have been upgraded. All this, I would like to put it on record, was probably possible because of the collaboration by the industry, and which was very ably and aptly represented by ACFI. They have been worthy representatives of the industry for sure, and it has also helped that it is constituted by stakeholders from all the verticals in the cargo industry. Whether it is the freight forwarders, whether it's the cargo terminals, even the airlines and what have you. Everybody is on board on the ACFI. So when they say something, it is taken seriously by everybody. And I have been in this industry for 3 years now. Even if I am at the ministry's end and at the regulator end, I would still see that, or rather stick out my neck and say that it is one industry where there are various players who are not just competing with each other, their interests are often conflicting with each other. So I really don't know how does ACFI do the balancing act and bring us a concise proposal, which might please some, annoy some, but on the whole, it is accepted by the industry, which is a great thing for us, for policy making and for implementation. So my compliments to ACFI and the team and all of you for making it possible for us to actually move ahead because of the inputs. If we look at the future now, again, since Dr. Agarwal and my friend Mr. Kaul has given great details of how the future would look like and how it should be, I would not now labor on to those points. I just mention a couple of points. E-commerce and express delivery cargo are the bright futures. These are bound to grow. And the fact remains that the airlines' clientele is to be high value, low volume, and time-sensitive commodities. These are also likely to remain the way they are, and they will only expand. So the future is really bright. But we have to be cognizant and aware and fleet-footed to also look at the challenges. Again, the major ones have been highlighted. I would only say, a point that I thought has not been mentioned, that you have to contend with an increasingly efficient, fast, and cost-effective competition, not from the airlines, but from the roadways and the railways. So what is important is that we have to ensure that our processes and turnaround times are reduced further. There is not much that can be done at the cost end. At the cost end, the major component is, of course, the ATF and whatever the flight and the airport requirements are, but also the tax for which we have been doing our bit. It was mentioned in the earlier presentation that VAT on ATF has been reduced. 36 states are there which had earlier VAT rates which are pretty high. Now they are down to 31. There are 5 states who still have to, should I say, fall in line. But I am sure with the passage of time and with the realization that the business that comes in consequent to decrease in VAT and increase in air volumes offsets the loss that they perceive or think that would exist, but it doesn't actually. So they will eventually come around to this school of thought and bring it down. But the processes that are now in our hands in many ways are with the airports themselves, the airlines, the cargo terminals, and everybody else in the value chain. It would really help if there is a standard operating procedure. Of course, in paper, we all have SOPs. But if that SOP is accepted and created or arrived at after discussions with all the stakeholders, there's a timeline to each of these steps, and it is transparently visible to everybody. That would be a great help. Of the costing, I do understand that costing is a commercial decision, pricing is a commercial decision, so it is not easy for everyone to share it across the board on an open platform. But at least a semblance of that can be brought in. You can bring in a rack rate and then maybe give a concession, but at least people should know what are they going in for, instead of having a crude form of an open outcry system at the airport, which unnecessarily congests the airport and is also not good for the people who are dealing with these issues. The other process is, of course, the regulatory process. The regulatory process, both from the security as well as the safety perspective. The aviation sector in India, as every other sector in the country, is susceptible to a higher, I would say, threat perception. So the security agencies would obviously be on their toes and would set a standard which sometimes the players in the private sector might feel that this is impeding their business. Maybe it is, but then it gets into the system and eventually you do account for that and you can plan for that, so it eases out in a way. Having said that, I would not for a moment shy away from the fact that there are other things that can be done and which we need to improve upon, which we are working on assiduously. And we'll of course be happy to join shoulders with you and see to it that whatever that can be changed should be changed. And what learning is there, we have to be outward looking also. We have to look at the international best practices. And again, the uniqueness of the country, the size of the country, the dimensions of the country and the diversity in the country would not actually lend itself to the international best practices to be brought in ipso facto here. We will have to adapt them according to our needs and our requirements. So it would not help us if we say that in Singapore it happens this way, and why is it that the Delhi airport is not doing it in that particular way, or maybe in Germany it is like this, or US, Memphis does it in one way, why not in Bombay? That is not going to happen, and that perhaps is not our aspiration also. Our aspiration would be fast turnaround time, ease of doing business, and cost efficiency. It might be our own creation or it might be something that we learn from others. The objective should not be lost sight of. The other challenge, I was looking at the itinerary, you have a full-fledged session on that. That is the sustainability aspect. We have to bear in mind in whatever we do, our ultimate aim of zero carbon emissions. This is going to be a long-drawn process. It might have some cost in the short term, maybe even in the medium term, but in the long term, we owe it to mankind, we owe it to our next generations that we take that into our consideration when we take the decisions about the air cargo movement. I'm told In fact, there was a news item that came in that the government of France has made it mandatory that no air transport of cargo shall be allowed if the distance that is to be covered is less than a certain number. I believe it is 350 kilometers. So this is something that the government has mandated. In India, of course, it is premature to say that we are going to do that, and I do believe that we should not even do that. This is something that the industry should absorb by themselves. And in this context, what they can do is that they can work in convergence with the other sources, other modes of transport, the roads and the rail, because they would ferry the short distances and the medium distances. Maybe rail can do the longer distances within the country, but outside the country, it is only the airways and the shipping that is going to be to hold fort. So this is where they should concentrate rather than try and compete with the roads for shorter distances. And then, of course, there was one instance where a delegation that had gone to Germany, where we were told that a major logistics supply chain company in Germany has taken an internal decision that any shipment that they can deliver overnight need not always be carried by air. I know intuitively what I'm saying is not music to the airline industry and the people who are dealing with the air cargo industry, but this is something that is bound to happen sooner or later. We have to look at efficiencies at the end of it, and we have to look at how we converge with other modes of transport. And it is a win-win situation, ladies and gentlemen. Believe me, the pie is large and it is expanding at such a pace that there's no risk of anybody losing out in the cake. So it is for everyone and in the interest of our future generation that we take this into consideration. I think this has been a very unusual inaugural session in many ways. We have exceeded the time limits, and we've had an exhaustive discussion on most of the times. I think in the remaining sessions, the speakers would probably struggle what to talk about and what to discuss. But I'm sure with the expertise, you will always have new things and new ideas that will come in and will enrich the august audience here. Finally, I would, on that note, of course, I would like to keep this short and sweet, and I'll stop here. But finally, before I take my seat, I would once again congratulate ACFI on this conclave, which happens to be their 12th birthday, not exactly to date, but at least the 12th anniversary. So my compliments to ACFI and best wishes to the conference and to ACFI and the industry for a very bright future. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for having me here.